Hi and welcome to Movies Suck. Well, this is a rather strange bit of news and not something I expected to ever have to report on or ever consider reporting on because, well, it makes no sense. There is no good reason on God's green earth for this to ever be reported on, no good reason for this to ever happen ever anywhere in the history of the universe. But it's happening, apparently, even though it is utterly shameful, stupid, ridiculous, and other words that go on to show how stupid and ridiculous something can actually truly be. When you reach that outer M, when you're about to fall off the edge into complete oblivious retardation, that's where we find ourselves right now. So, let's have a look at the screen I have in front of me. And what do I see on this screen? Those historians out there will recognize this lady immediately as being rather famous in English history. But why is this important? And what is so obviously, glaringly obvious? Scroll down, shall we? What feature about this girl stands out the most? In all these different representations of this girl, what stands out the most? What could it be? In case any of you don't know, this is a lady whose name is Anne Boleyn. She was married to Henry VIII. She was actually his second wife. She's rather famous for being the wife that broke up the Catholic Church in England. For this girl, Henry VIII cut off ties with the Catholic Church and decided to establish himself as the head of the English Church. He was previously married to Catherine of Aragon. But this lady, Anne Boleyn, is massively important in British history. Massively important. So, why am I bothering to look at her? This isn't a history channel. Well, there is a reason. And before we get into reason, let's have a look at another person. See if you notice any particular aspect of this person that just jumps out at you. What about this lady jumps out at you? Especially when compared to, say, this lady. What is it, the feature that you notice most between the two? What difference is there between these two women that is so glaringly obvious? Painfully obvious, you might say. I think you probably all figured it out by now, but let's read this crazy story and we'll get into finer detail. Okay, so, exclusive. Here's a hot one. British model and Queen and Slim actress Jodie Turner-Smith is to play Anne Boleyn in a convention-defying Channel 5 drama made by the Sony-backed Stan and Ollie producer Fable Pictures. To sum it up, this woman is going to be playing Anne Boleyn. Really. Deadline can reveal that Viacom CBS-owned broadcaster has commissioned a 3-part series that will examine the downfall of Anne Boleyn through the prism of a psychological thriller rather than the stuffy period drama retreading the demise of Henry VIII's second wife. This stuffy period drama, what you mean, like people trying to represent things accurately? That kind of boring period drama, retreading stuff that we've already seen many times over. Yeah, so the question is, why would you want to retread it again in such a far out kind of way? Because this lady and this lady are a little bit too different. Now, to be fair, if you look at a description of Anne Boleyn about her appearance, she is described on occasion as being swarthy and a little bit olive-skinned from her time period. She had slightly darker skin than was normal, but she was also English and obviously white. Now, she might have been a little less white than most, but when you're talking about most back then, they were sheet white. Like, well, let's face it, more than 80% of the UK as it stands now. But how can you get this lady, who's not a bad looking lady on the whole, but to play this lady, a historic character? This isn't some made-up character that never existed and can be attuned however you want. This is a real person. This person really existed. So, if you're going to make, I don't know, some sort of psychological thriller about a historic real person, then surely, trying to get someone who has some resemblance to that original person would make sense. Otherwise, what you're doing is creating fiction, using the name of someone that really existed and the situation in which she existed. Since I assume that this Anne Boleyn that this person's going to play is going to be married to a man named Henry VIII. Weird her, who'd probably just divorced Catherine of Aragon. She's probably going to be playing that Anne Boleyn, which is a real person, which means that this is a historic thriller. A historic psychological thriller, supposedly. But, of course, the fact that they've gone out on such a limb means that it's no longer historic and can no longer truly be classified as being related to the character they're trying to represent. Because this in no way will represent Anne Boleyn. Some threads from the series might represent the situation she was in. The closest you could say this woman has in feature to Anne Boleyn is she has dark eyes. Anne Boleyn was very famous for her beautiful dark eyes. It's up in the air as to what colour her hair is. Most people say brunette, but they say she could have been more like a redhead, which would have made sense in England back then, redheads being far more prevalent than they are now, although in the UK, still very, very prevalent. But anyway, penned by newcomer Eve Hedwick Turner, the drama shines a feminist light on the final months of Boleyn's life, reimagining her struggle with Tudor England's patriarchal society, her desire to secure a future for her daughter Elizabeth, and the brutal reality of her failure to provide Henry with a male heir. Yeah, but unfortunately you've discounted all this story. This is just a story. This isn't historic anymore. No matter how you might be setting it in a real historic era, you might as well have called her anything you like. This isn't going to be a character representing Anne Boleyn. It's just going to be some black girl that's, for some reason, turned up in a entirely white society. It's rather freakish. She wouldn't just be famous, she'd been astonishingly famous, probably executed. But nevertheless, obviously she will be executed if in this series. Maybe she won't be executed. They've already jumped the gun here, so why the hell would they bother telling the story correctly? There's no need. You don't need to attempt to tell the story of Anne Boleyn when you're not even bothering to try and represent Anne Boleyn. It's absolutely bizarre. Who would come up with this? Why would they come up with this? I cannot imagine what they were thinking. And the patriarchal society, of course it was a patriarchal society back then. What they're not telling you is that Henry VIII's fourth wife, Anne of Cleves, led a completely independent life back in that time period. She was her own woman, essentially. She was married to Henry VIII, but the marriage was annulled because of various different things relating to the fact that Henry VIII didn't find her attractive at all. Stuff about saggy breasts and things like that. But nevertheless, when after that annulment, Henry VIII gave her property and lands and things, and she led a completely independent life as pretty much the richest woman in Britain. Second only to the Queen, she answered to no men except the King, and yet it was a major patriarchal society that women just couldn't survive in. Well, no, that's not the case at all. Women were generally secondary to men, but as we can see with Anne of Cleves, not absolutely everyone. Anyway, Anne of Cleves being an interesting character, actually. She was very, very interesting. And from all accounts, an absolutely genuinely lovely girl. Nevertheless, let's read a little bit further of this nonsense. Fable has assembled an eye-catching cast to star alongside Turner Smith, who teamed up with Daniel Kaluuya on this apparently Queen and Slim, whatever that is, and featured in TV shows including Jet and True Blood. Her co-stars include I May Destroy You's breakout performer Papa. I said that I May Destroy You's, like, if it's the program I think it is yeah, that's creepy shit. Anyway, working titled Anne Boleyn, the series will be helmed by Deadwater Fell director Lindsay Miller. Fable founders Faye Ward and Anne and Hannah Farrell. What is with all these women being in control of this film? It's rather strange how they seem to be specifically designed to not allow any men to be in control of this film, which is probably why you've ended up with the nonsense you've ended up with. It's absolute bollocks. That is the kindest way I can describe what is happening with this. Do you think the rest of the cast is going to be multicoloured as well? Since obviously historical accuracy is not something they're interested in for this film. or this series, they have no interest whatsoever in telling the story of Anne Boleyn. They're just telling a story. There's a person called Anne Boleyn. There's probably going to be a Henry VIII and a Catherine of Aragon. There's probably going to be a few of these people running around the place. Thomas Cromwell turn up every once in a while. Probably some Jamaican bartender. Who the fuck knows? Apparently Sony Pictures is co-financing this project. Why? I don't know. And they're going to distribute it internationally. Apparently historian Dan Jones, who has an overall deal with Sony, is an executive producer, so they have a historian involved. Why? Why did they bother with a historian? What was the purpose of that? What did that guy have to do? I imagine he sat there and said, well, no, she's white, so you're going to have to find a different actress. And they're like, no, I'm sorry, we're just going to carry on with what we wanted to do. And then it says, yeah, she was beheaded at the end. And they're saying, no, we don't think she was beheaded. Let's do something else. Let's have her fight off aliens using a sword. And then he says, yeah, that's not really quite accurate. So, well, whatever, I'm going home. I imagine that's what Dan Jones said, and pretty much about the majority of his involvement. And if that's not the majority of his involvement, I might have to have a bit of a delve into Dan Jones and find out what the hell else he's done and been involved with, because it's utterly ridiculous. Apparently this was commissioned by Ben Frau of Viacom CBS. And apparently Anne Boleyn is his favourite person in history. And the idea of this was a big hit with Channel 5's audience? What? Okay. Apparently the project reframes her story as a propulsive psychological thriller, told from a new perspective with top talent like Jodie Turner-Smith attached. Oh yeah, the actress. Forgot who the hell it was. I've never heard of her before, so how would I remember? It's simply too irresistible to say no to, he said. Warden Farrell added, we feel that history has sidelined the voice of this ambitious queen in favour of the men who brought her down, and that Lindsay Miller's beautiful, intimate vision will put Anne's gaze to the heart of the piece. Turner-Smith continued, delving deeper into Anne Boleyn's immense strengths while examining her fatal weaknesses and vulnerabilities. Eve's script immediately captured my imagination. Well, you can say that. I mean, Anne Boleyn was never thought of as really beautiful. She was thought of as, a nice-looking girl on the whole. Apparently she had a couple of things that people used to be mean to her about, and historically people who have written descriptions of her have been very mean to her, and many descriptions are written after the fact. Her biggest attribute seemed to have been that she was a very elegant person. She carried herself well. She was intelligent. She could play music as far as I remember. And she generally was a very graceful person who people just liked to spend time with, which is how she captured Henry VIII. There are a lot of various other stories about her being very mean and things, and I think I heard a story about her wanting to make Catherine of Aragon her lady in waiting, and various other horrible stories about her which are probably not true, and are probably written after the fact because, well, after Henry VIII managed to get rid of her, I think he destroyed as many pictures of her as he could find and various other bits and bobs, which was sad, really. Otherwise we might have a more accurate drawing of her. Maybe one which is portrayed. Maybe it'd be black. Maybe she'll be a black woman in those original paintings that were destroyed by Henry VIII. No, that's bollocks. This is something we're really going to look forward to. I don't know if I'll be able to actually watch it. I might be able to sit through it and do a review, but the odds are not good if this ever happens. Let's hope it doesn't, because it's utterly, utterly ridiculous. This has been Movie Suck, thinking that Anne Boleyn should probably be played by someone who resembles her a little bit, or can at least be made to resemble her. Maybe Jodie Turner-Smith is going to turn up in whiteface. I don't know. In any case, this is bonkers, and I will catch you guys on the flip side.